on here. So I guess first and foremost, my name is Kyle McDonald. I'm the owner and operator of a company called Competitive Performance Consulting, which is a mental performance and overall performance consulting company. My background, I coached hockey for a number of years, and then in 2013, I elected to start this business, and it's kind of progressed from there. I'm a member of the Sport Medicine Council of Saskatchewan. I also work with numerous organizations, probably most notably Hockey Canada, and the lead mental performance consultant with our national para team, and then a variety of, I've worked all the way from saddle bronc to curling and of course golf and stuff like that from an individual sport point of view. So as far as today, what I want to talk about is I'm just going to talk about stress, and I'm going to talk about, you know, especially as it relates to what we're going through right now in these times with the COVID pandemic. And then I'm also going to talk about how that relates to what you can do as a golfer. I think first and foremost, you know, when we talk about sports psychology and we talk about mental performance, I think we tend to blur lines a little bit. Mental performance is not the same as mental health. Mental health is its own, in my eyes, is its own silo, just as mental performance is. You know, there is some things, you know, if you have a good breathing technique to help you with your anxiety, that's going to transfer over when you maybe feel anxious in school for an exam or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, you know, mental performance is there to help our athletes perform when the time is there that they need to perform. And I think mental health is also very, very important, but they're not the same thing. My avenue has strictly been into performance. I strictly work with athletes and professionals that are striving to be their best and stuff like that. So that's how I'm going to attack today is from the performance standpoint. And, you know, with conversations with individual players that I work with and organizations in this time, we've really tried to zero in about what a great opportunity this is for us to grow. Is it hard? Absolutely. Is there some negative feelings? 100%. But there is some things that we can do to make sure we come out on the other side better versions of ourselves. And hopefully I take you through a little bit of that process and what we're talking about. So I'm just going to take a few minutes here to share the screen. I'm not going to show the full screen. Just, I found in the last few webinars, anytime I shared the screen on the full screen and then someone tried to come in, it kind of got messed up and jumbled up. So I think one of the first things that we always want to talk about when we have a situation that we're in right now as an athlete is our perception. You know, our perception is so important right now, and perception is really tied into our mindset and our mentality. And, you know, if you take a look at this picture, you know, it's really easy to be negative about this picture. The horse is backward, there's square wheels, there's people watching, the horse looks tired. I mean, it's really easy to jump on that negative train. And I think it's important when we're in those types of situations, just like we are right now, can't go out and train, can't go out and hit balls. What is our perception and how are we going to still grow from this? And I think, you know, when you're faced with a situation or an event, we always get to paint the picture that we want. And so this horse is backwards because it's easier to push a squared wheel wagon. And the horse is tired because it is the horse. They always count on that horse to push that wagon. People are watching because they know that horse is going to commit to its role and responsibility. And whatever picture we have and whatever we want to do, it's really important that we kind of create the perception that we really want. And part of that, when we talk about those things, and you know, Tom Peters talks about it as soft skills, you know, I think some of that is human skills, mentality, mindset, you know, how we grow, things like, you know, cohesion and creativity and what we do in this time frame will dominate how effective we can be moving forward. And all that starts from this idea of perception, and it's so important. And from there, we kind of move into the opportunity. And lo and behold, just last week, Jack Nicklaus tweeted this out, and he said, one of the beauties of golf is that it is a constant battle with the golf course, yourself and your own limitations. And you can start strengthening your mental game today from the comfort of your own home. And hopefully I take you through this. And yes, there's stress, and yes, there's some kind of angst in not knowing what's happening and the uncertainty of it. But we can also develop a regime and a scheme to kind of establish ourselves and make sure we're doing the best we can as a performer. And I always talk with athletes that I work with about but enjoying and loving the process. I heard a great stat last week that 80% of a PGA player's annual earnings comes from 5 tournaments. So just imagine that. So 5 tournaments. And all of a sudden we want to create this kind of idea of perfectionism that we're going to be perfect all the way along. And it doesn't work that way. And we have to love the process. And part of that process is the stuff that creates stress, the stuff that we find frustrating and annoying, and how we're going to combat those types of things. And, when things are certain and we know things are going to happen for us, we usually are able to buy in and align, right? If I told you, if you put in so many hours of on range, and I promise you 100% certain you're going to shoot 68 and you're in a round in the summer, you'd probably be like, okay, I'll take that. And that's a certain thing, right? It creates ground for action and wellness. And we usually muster the motivation to go out and do it if we know it's going to happen. Where what we're going through right now in sports has a connection is that there's a lot of uncertainty. You can put in 1 million hours on the range and it's not going to guarantee you a win. And so that's why I say we always have to love the process and make sure that we're kind of looking at that type of mentality. And I think sometimes with the uncertainty and what we're living through now, it kind of breeds some indecision. We tend to make excuses and stuff like that. So rather than go that route and have that perception, just like the horse is backwards and those are square wheels, is to have the perception about this is how we're going to find a way to make sure we're doing the best that we can do, and to make sure that we're finding a way to commit to goals. And those goals might be different than what they were 2 months ago. But being aware and making sure that we change that aspect is so important. And this just gives us such a great opportunity to grow and understand that, yes, it's difficult, but make sure that we can handle the event and make sure we have the proper response. I think sometimes as well, when we look at events, when things are uncertain and it develops fear, then our clarity goes down as well. And we tend to blame and complain about things instead of saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to be courageous. And this is how I'm going to structure my day now. And I think that's the opportunity to grow, because we learn to do that now through this, making that bogey on the second hole, we're going to be able to manage that as well. And so I just can't stress enough that, yes, there's a lot of stress in front of us right now, but it creates a great opportunity to grow, and it creates a great why. We can grow our mental capacity. We learn, like I've mentioned before, we learn how to manage stress. We learn to separate how we handle good days and bad days. And if you talk about high level and professional players, their ability to manage their bad days are really good. Where I find in amateur athletes, our bad days, we go from 6 to 2 out of 10 really quick, instead of saying, hey, you know what, I'm not feeling my 100%. I'm not swinging it as well as I can. So I need to create that mindset and that mentality that I need to be a 6 or a 7 instead of a 5 out of 10. And most amateur athletes go the opposite way. They see the horse that's backwards. They see the wheels that are square, instead of saying, this is what I have today and how I'm going to move forward. That's mental toughness. Mental toughness is not negating that negativity. Mental toughness is learning how to manage it. And that's what this pandemic is creating for us. It's giving us an opportunity to figure out what our thought patterns are and how we can build our identity and how we can differentiate from others as well. So what is, probably the 3 big ones that I work with in athletes is anxiety, stress, and pressure. And I talked earlier about the idea of mental health and what is mental health. And, I think when you have high anxiety and you see these things over numerous times and it's hard for you to get out of a day without panic attacks, you might be going down that mental health route. But I think, when we're faced with a big event, our responses become even more important. And so you're going to have worrying, and you're going to have the so-called butterflies and maybe feel nauseous. And I think that's common. And I think that our anxiety, in my eyes, is really derived from because we care and because we want to make sure that we do well. So from performance anxiety point of view, we can really do a good job of managing that, right? Secondly, pressure comes from it's internal. It's kind of, usually what happens with this idea of pressure is that we see a situation and we feel anxious with the situation. When we feel anxious, you know, our muscles get tense, and that's why we miss sometimes those shortcuts, is because we're not allowing our muscles to do what they're supposed to do. And some people refer to this as choking. And so what are one of the things that help us with pressure? Well, making sure that we're breathing and making sure that we have a good mindfulness technique when we're aware that we're in that situation. If we learn how to do that now, once again, we can transfer that over to the golf course as well. And then, you know, stress, you know, a relationship between the person and the environment that is appraised by the person is relevant to his or her well-being, in which the person's resources are taxed or exceeded. I think we get stressed because we care. We get stressed because of the exam, because we care. We want to do well, right? We really paint a picture of things like, you know, being outcome orientated and making sure that when we shoot a good number, we feel really good. But in my eyes, a strong mental game is kind of stays away from that number outcome. Of course, a good number is going to help us and make us feel good, but more importantly, what's been our process, and did we love the process that we were on the course? And instead of just assessing good versus bad shots, assess our process towards that shot, right? And there's lots of things that we can do to help deal with those stressors and stuff, but we tend to get stressed because of the outcome. I hit a bad shot, now I'm stressed. And so part of that and part of fixing that gap is making sure we have some good tools to move forward with. One thing I love sharing with my athletes is and not that I'm going to talk about all of these, but there are so many stress and emotions and how we appraise situations in our life. And it's not just about happy or sad. There's a lot of things going on in our lives. There's a lot of our attention's being drawn in a lot of areas, and just to make sure that we're aware of where we are. And not that every individual is going to go through this, but you know, if 20 people are in a group and there's 20 different brains and 20 different perceptions, and usually some of those perceptions of what's happening lies within this, right? Strong feelings, moderate feelings, mild feelings. So being aware of those things is really important. When the COVID, when this stuff started coming out, I think it was really great that the Canadian Centre of Mental Health for Sport came out and they started talking a lot about, you know, where you are in your comfort zone and where you are in your challenge zone and stuff like that, and making sure that you sorry, I'm just reading a group chat. So yeah, I'll increase the size here. So one of the things that the CCMHS talked about is, you know, we're always in a comfort zone, a challenge zone, or a stop zone. And you know, from a performance standpoint, you know, these things being in the stop zone, right, lashing out at others, worrying constantly, having trouble completing daily tasks, those things happen to us. It could be happening to you right now. So how do you come out of this zone, right? And you know, the challenge zone is really important because, you know, we kind of feel in one area we feel good, then we start feeling, hey, I'm being challenged a little bit. Now we're just going to kind of move into that stop zone. And if you're in that zone and you're worrying constantly and having trouble completing daily tasks, you know, what are we going to do to make sure you get out of that? And it happens on golf courses as well. And just it's a great little tool to kind of check in and be aware and ask yourself, hey, where am I today? What's going on in the morning, in the afternoon, kind of at night, and where you are. And once you develop that self-awareness, it does a great job in helping you realize what route you're going to go, right? If you wake up in the morning and you're in that stop zone, you might consciously really have to make an effort to get into some different zones and really try and make sure that you're trying to go from a 4 out of 10 to a 5 out of 10. So how do we manage all this stuff, right? And one of the things that I talk a lot about is this task-oriented coping and the theory behind it. I'm not a huge advocate of the word coping because I think coping kind of means something's wrong. I prefer management and being task-oriented in our management style. And at the bottom there, you can see distraction and disengage. I think that happens a lot, right? Where you just, you know, disengagement is just, you resign, you just move away. Distraction is maybe leaning a little bit more towards mental health with maybe addiction problems and stuff like that. My job as a mental performance consultant is to make sure, you know, we're using things like imagery, we're using things like mindfulness and breathing for relaxation. We're helping each other, we're seeking support. You know, we've done teams that I've worked with during this, we've done Zoom calls where we're all in and just having a conversation about maybe what's been a highlight of isolation, what's been a hindrance of isolation, and stuff like that. So, you know, the next part is just that effort expenditure. Where are we going to spend our effort? It's easy to spend our effort on the negative things. But if you sit up in the morning and you say, hey, these are the things that I'm going to do, that kind of leads into your idea of where I want to spend my effort. You know, logical analysis is just what it is. It's logical analysis. It's a good self-management skill. And then finally, your thought control, right? And I think thought control is really derived from our self-talk and what we're saying to ourselves. So, you know, those are the areas that I want to spend time with. And those are the skills that I want my athletes to develop, especially this time, because that's going to help us come out of this as better versions of what we went into. So real simple, what does task oriented mean right now? Eat well, right? Find ways to bring nutrition into the forefront. Sleep well, you know, have good activity, right? Improvise. You know, you might not be able to do everything that you used to be able to do, but find ways to do things that you can do. Hydrate well. You know, one of the things I'll talk about today here in a bit is just think and reflect. This is a great area and a great time to build our performance skills. I was talking with an individual client this morning and they said, so what should we be doing right now? And this is like an off season for a lot of individuals. So let's build some skills. Let's build our visualization. Let's build some self-talk. You know, let's find ways to do those things, right? Breathe. You know, apps like Headspace, Relax Meditation are great apps. I believe Headspace right now is giving a 30-day free trial as well. But it's amazing when we take a huge exhale and like a huge breath out, it sends a signal to tell our brain that everything's going to be okay. So don't forget to take a breath here, laugh. And one thing that I do with a lot of my teams and individuals is we have a Monday growth moment. And sometimes my teams will take control of it and our captains or leadership will do something with it. But just something that, you know, hey, I heard this on a podcast, or here's a great article, or whatever the case may be. You know, this past week I used Roy McIlroy had a thing on Golf TV about The Obstacle is the Way, which is a book, and just his application to it. I mean, what a great way to learn vicariously through somebody. So keep those things in mind. The other thing is, you know, if you haven't done so yet, set up a plan for yourself. You know, why are you going to be committed to your game right now? What's the purpose of it, right? Picture or vision of the desired future. What will it look like when you reach your goal? When you get back to playing, what's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like, right? How will you get there? What can you do during isolation to help you right now? To take the steps to get you to your desired future? Because there is stuff you can do, right? If an athlete tells me, hey, you know what, I'm mentally weak right now. Well, what are you doing to work on that and to build that stamina, right? You know, if you know, I talked to a leadership group today, right? They talk about how important communication is, and they talk about how important they want to communicate with everyone. Well, have you reached out to those that are part of your team, right? There's lots of things we can do that we can help take the steps right now. And then passion, right? What will I personally be doing to make this a success? What can I do right now to help myself, right? And what does commitment look like for me? At the end of the day, this time is a time to build your mental space, is to build those tools, right? Because usually what happens is an incident will happen to us, and then the emotion will come out, and think about this from the negative. Something bad happens, right? I make a bogey that I didn't want to make. Emotion, probably feel frustrated, maybe annoyed, maybe angry, maybe upset. And then we kind of go downhill. And the idea behind a strong mental skills program is not negating those things, but using the tools to help you perform, right? So most of the time, bad incident, emotion, takes time for us to get out of it. Our key as high performers is to suppress that time. So instead of taking 4 holes to get over that situation or that bad emotion, we need to get over it in 4 minutes. How are we going to do that? Build your mental skills, right? Your self-talk, your visualization, and make it automatic during this time. And that's how you do that, right? So, you know, what's your focus point in a time of crisis? And when you ask a lot of people that, A, they might not know, or B, they don't know because it's usually negative. They usually start saying, why is this happening to me? I have such bad luck. Can't believe this. You know, if I got to the golf course just a little bit earlier and I hit that extra chip, instead of being right in the moment, right? So it's really important when we think about things like this, is to make sure we start finding ways to develop the space to use our mental skills. One of the things that helps us with using those mental skills is our emotional intelligence. At the end of the day, and the cartoon on your left says it all. So who's behind all my problems? It's usually you. If you can't get off the tee, it's usually you. Something's going on. Is it technical? Yes, no. If it's no, is it mental? Yes. Are you too nervous? Are you gripping the club too tight? What can you do to do that, right? And the other one, I share it with everybody I work with. Guys, performance is hard. I think a lot of the time we see things on TV and we think that's the expectation. That's where I need to be. And that's not the case. You know, a lot of the things we see on TV are the exceptions to the rules, right? And so finding your own path and finding what works for you from a mental skills point of view is so, so important, right? Because life is difficult, sports is difficult. And so I think sometimes it's really easy to shoot a bad score and say our confidence is effective. If your confidence is true and genuine, your confidence shouldn't be shook by a bad score, right? It should help you move forward, okay? You know, if you look at what's going on in our world in the pandemic or even on the golf course, we're always in one of these areas. We're either accepting what's happening, we're questioning. You know, it's funny, if we're playing really, really well, and if you really develop your self-awareness and you really know what's going on, when something bad, we lip out a putt, we usually accept it and move on. But when we're playing maybe not to our expectation and we lip out that same putt, we usually detach or become resistant to things. We get upset, we get angry, we get sad, right? At the end of the day, in a 4.5, 5 hour round, this is not a one-way process. It's not like you start on hole one and you're resisting and then you move to detach. This is not a one-way process. Therefore, you're going to have to manage all of these things. You're going to have to manage, you know, when you do feel resistance. You have to manage when you do start feeling detached, right? It's funny. One of the things about being detached is usually when we detach ourselves, we start playing better, right? We've had a few bad holes and then all of a sudden our internal dialogue starts going, well, you know what? I didn't care about it anyways. And then all of a sudden the next 3 holes, we're like, hey, you know, I'm 1 under par or I'm even par. It's because we released that pressure. And so there's got to be better ways. And once again, it comes back to our preparation skills, our self-talk, our visualization, stuff like that, right? Why is emotional intelligence so important is because, hey, at the end of the day, playing golf is emotional. It is an emotional environment. And I think we have to learn how to deal with anxiety and manage anxiety. And we also need to make sure we delay initial impulses so that we respond accurately, right? And I think it's real, our initial impulse, you know, depending on personalities and not to get too far into that, but get mad, get upset, blame others. And we have to delay that initial impulse. And so what is emotional intelligence? You know, 2 things that I work a lot with individual clients is self-awareness and self-management, right? What really, you know, emotional self-awareness, what really helps me succeed, what holds me back, right? And accurate self-assessment, right? So if you know, if you have a playing partner that you always play with who hits it 50 yards further than you do, your game shouldn't be modeled after them. Your game should be modeled maybe after someone who has the same type of shot pattern, ball flight, trajectory, stuff like that. That's loving the process. It's easy to sit there and say, hey, I want to hit it like Dustin Johnson. But if you don't hit it like Dustin Johnson, who do you hit it like? And what are the variables that help shape that individual's identity, right? That is such a huge thing. It's great that we love Brooke Henderson, but and it would be great that Brooke Henderson is a role model, but should you model your game after her? That's good self-assessment. And maybe you should, but maybe you shouldn't. Just don't fall in love with the outcomes that he or she has had, right? And if we do that, then we generate some more self-confidence, right? Because we haven't set these expectations far and wide. We're starting to understand what our process and our identity is, right? Self-awareness and self-management are 2 huge components of identity, right? What's self-management? You know, adaptability, right? You know, trustworthiness, conscientiousness, and self-control. Social awareness, social skill. I think those come especially when we talk about team sport. You know, understanding, you know, in golf, it could be something as simple as your caddy, but empathy, you know, service orientation and stuff like that. Like I said, where we start is usually self-awareness and self-management. Last thing here is just about confidence. You know, one of the biggest things I get is, well, you know, if we take a look at our situation right now, the pandemic's taking away from my confidence. You know, that's a big victim loop, right? To ignore, denying, blaming, you know, hiding. Our job, my job as a mental performance consultant, is to get us into that accountability loop. Make sure we recognize it, forgive, self-examine, learn, take action. Right? Those are two, or one huge thing is to be accountable. Right? It goes back to that first cartoon. Understand that you're accountable for your game and where you're going. And that kind of leads us, if we're accountable and we love that process, that leads us to kind of the idea of confidence, right? It's multidimensional. It comes from a lot of areas. It's responsive. It responds to adversity and setbacks, right? Whether you shoot 65 or 69 or 75 or 80, you're going to have setbacks in a round. And true confidence, it's about how we react to those situations, right? It's a strong belief, and it's also developed through time. And I think that's really important, is that confidence isn't just one day. We have to make a conscious effort every day to develop it, and that comes from everything we do, from strength and conditioning to mental skills to practices on the range to playing 9 holes to competition and tracking all that type of stuff. So just a couple examples. You know, this is a routine that I have some individual clients doing right now. You know, they have 3 days of mindfulness, they have some visualization, they have some scripts there as well. But this is where we say, hey, let's build some mental skills and take 20 minutes a day to start painting the picture of how we want to play and what we want to do, right? Last thing about confidence is that confidence is really directed towards our self-talk and how we define ourselves and what we say to ourselves. And this is one example from an athlete. This is from a DISC assessment, and it's called a word sketch. So if you look at the blue there, you know, this athlete is accurate, exacting, precise, systematic. So when things go south and we're in that crisis mode, this is something I want that athlete, A, to remind herself of, and B, to make sure I'm reminding her of it as well. And make sure she knows, hey, in that time of stress, you're going to be precise. You need to be systematic, as opposed to, you know, other things and worrying about the other stuff, the emotions, the negativity. We need to figure out what we're going to do and make sure we're high in procedures and we follow what we want to get out of the situation. So that's just one example. At the end of the day, what we say to ourselves, and words perpetuate performance, is something, you know, a child, if we are talking to ourselves like a child, we're always talking to ourselves like the victim, right? If you think about a 4 or 5-year-old child, when things don't go their way, they're the victim, right? There's the voice inside of ourselves. That's the hard parent. That's outcome focused. And I think it's very important to have that voice at times, right? Black and white, win or lose, right? There's the soft parent that says, hey, this is going to happen for us next time. That voice is very important as well. At the end of the day, though, the adult voice is the most important, because the adult voice ties into the process, and the process we must love. And so the adult voice is curious in the how and finds ways to learn. Hidden in the trees, why? What do I need to do the next time so that doesn't happen? That's falling in love with the process, not just the emotional reaction of hitting it into the trees, right? Last thing that I'll show you here, and I believe most of you got this, or you should have if you had signed up to the original one, is just this athlete workbook. This is a three-day plan. So there's some mindfulness in there, and then there's some journal entries, right? And I talked about this already. You know, what's been a highlight of isolation, what's been difficult in isolation. It goes all the way into some ideas from some different books about how you can journal and creating scripts and focus points for yourself right now and stuff like that. So just some food for thought. And yeah, I'm going to open it up here for questions, and feel free to use the chat or just speak up if you like. There's about 10 of us in here right now. So yeah. Any questions at all? If you don't want to speak up, just use the chat at the bottom. All right, pretty quiet group. So what I'm going to do is, you know, you should have my contact information. If you do have questions, oh, there's maybe one. You're very welcome. If you do have some questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Make sure you take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and be safe. I appreciate you guys coming in. One question here is, how should we react to a bad haul? One of the things, perspective. Bad holes are going to happen. And if you have 5 bad holes in a round, how do we manage it so you only have 4? I think sometimes we go from 0 to 60 really quick. We go from, I can't have any bad holes, and that just creates, once again, more anxiety, more pressure and stuff like that. You're going to have bad holes. Every time you step onto the next tee, you should have a resetting pattern and to make sure you can fall back on that reset and stuff like that, I think is very, very important. So, golf, there's a lot of mistakes that are happening in golf. So, in my personal opinion, I think sometimes on TV, we see these expectations of the shots that are hit, but they don't show the shots that ended up in the sand, right? We just see the miraculous shot out of the sand. And so we're going to hit bad shots. Make sure you're resetting and really, at the end of the day, really stress it being present and really stress being in that moment to hit that shot, whether that's a punch out from the trees or a flop shot over a bunker. Be present for that shot. And if you can fall in love with that type of process, it usually goes a long way to recovering from a bad hole. Some of the techniques to handle bad holes: breathe. If you don't have a breathing routine or a mindfulness routine that you can use on the golf course and strong self-talk structure, you should really look for one, because breathing it combats a lot of the stuff. Like I said before, that one exhale, that huge exhale, tells our brain everything's going to be okay. And so sometimes we need to remind ourselves everything's going to be okay when we mishit some of those shots. And so just make sure that you have that technique. I can't stress enough when I talk about preparation skills, visualization, self-talk, breathing, mindfulness. Right now, a lot of my individual athletes are on a mindfulness plan. And so they're doing mindfulness every day with some visualization based on their identity and what they want to do. Those techniques that you're working on right now are going to transfer into your pre-shot routine and how you prepare for each shot and how you handle when you don't hit the shot that you want, right? Think about the bad shots you hit. You react because the ball didn't go where you wanted, instead of assessing how your process was. It's huge to assess your process. Any other questions? Great. Hey, I appreciate you guys jumping in on Friday. I'm glad you were able to make it today as opposed to Monday. Hopefully you're signed up for the one on the 27th. If you haven't received the activity book, fire me a quick email. And if you haven't signed up for the 27th, make sure that you try to. So I appreciate your guys' time and enjoy your long weekend and be safe and take care of your loved ones. All right. We'll talk soon.